I'd like to continue talking for a moment about the exegesis and its influence on the practice. Please turn to images 7, 8 and 9, Flora and Patra. You can just view these in your own time while I'm talking. These works combine Balinese wood carving. In further research for the exegesis on Bali, for example, and through feedback sessions with Monash staff, the issue of autonomy was subjected to critical scrutiny because I propose that my art's autonomousness is connected to a viable politics of beauty. I acknowledge that the practice embodied aspects of the social, most obviously that the work intersected with Balinese culture and the painted wall was in a public setting. The impact of this for the practice was that firstly, using cultural theory to research colonialism and art in the exegesis, and then interviewing Balinese artists, I evaluated my practice ethically. A decision was made to retain works for the practice that were collaborative with Balinese woodcarver Ketut Suaka. This was on the basis that Balinese agency played a role in collaboration. A further research question then was also posed. Given the dominance of the consideration of the social in contemporary art, for example, the widespread use by artists of relational aesthetics, is the concept of autonomous, beautiful art effective politically in new scenes of the social in art? My proposition is that the autonomous nature of my work retains its political viability in new scenes of the social. I'll address this in more depth later in the presentation when I discuss the politics of my work. So if you just turn to image 10 now to show some other work that just provides a bit of colour for this presentation. I'd like to talk now more about the exegesis and the structure that was used to develop the arguments. The introduction provided the literature review and established the major research question, can beauty be radical in art today? The first chapter, titled A Plethora of Beauties, What is the Context for My Art?, asked the question, what is the context for a radical politics of beauty in art today? I selected the context for which I was adopting beauty operating in my own art from different philosophical concepts of beauty. This was a formal concept originating in Kant's philosophy that emanates from beauty in nature. This is beauty for beauty's sake, not connected to goodness. Arguments were then made for the context in which beauty for beauty's sake could be radical today. It was proposed beauty's radicalism today was in the context of the institutionalisation of the anti-aesthetic position, and that beauty's non-rational aspect could be ameliorative, leading us to a better life. The second chapter, a history chapter, asked if there were historical precedents for invoking beauty for beauty's sake radically that may be relevant in my work today. Identifying autonomy and prettiness as agencies of beauty, as agencies operating in my work, I found that German philosopher Immanuel Kant's judgment of reflective beauty was related to otherness, and the artists of English aestheticism invoked the pretty to challenge religious authority and ideas. The way that Kant's thoughts informed the work of German philosopher Theodor Adorno on beauty, and how English aestheticism related to the work of British artist Jeremy Gilbert Rolfe, who argues today for the radical beauty of nature, was identified. These ideas were related to aspects of my own art. It was proposed that radical beauty has continuation with the past. So chapter 3 was titled Bright Zimmerman and Cats, the Nowness of Radical Beauty. In order to demonstrate that my interests were linked to other artists in the field, I examined the work of contemporaries who state that they are interested in beauty. American painter Alex Katz, his nature paintings, British artist Kate Bright, her nature paintings, and German artist Peter Zimmermann paints brightly coloured resin paintings. I referred to the aesthetic theory of Theodor Adorno, who argued that autonomous art, by means of its social mimesis, recovers the unmediated view of natural beauty. Adorno's notion that beautiful autonomous art is the antidote to commodification was explored and argued for in a contemporary, more social context. It was proposed that contemporary artists engage radical beauty today. So the last two chapters were on my own practice, and chapter 4 was the Bali chapter, the inspiration chapter, Cape of Flowers. This documented the inspiration for the practice, Bali, a place where beauty is sought after in the expression of Balinese Hinduism. It analysed the issue of colonialism and whether or not other Western artists had drawn on Balinese estimations of beauty to be radical in their own cultures. It examined how surrealist playwright Antonin Artaud helped to change the course of Western theatre with his book, The Theatre and Its Double, inspired by the beauty of Balinese dance. It was concluded that my work was positioned elsewhere to colonialism, and Western artists have drawn from the inspiration from the beauty of Bali to create radical works in their own culture. Now, Chapter 5 is not written yet, it's on my own work. It will reaffirm my position on beauty and will investigate Adorno's ideas about natural beauty and autonomous art, examining the role of death in the work. The materiality of the practice will also be addressed. You may view the remaining images now till image 13 after the rest of the presentation. I'd like to return now to the outcome of the practice and talk more in detail about how the practice is an example of radical beauty in art. Firstly, I'd like to consider the notion of otherness acting in the art. I was interested that in production it was important to me that the work did not duplicate natural scenes that I found beautiful. Fine art seems to carry a taboo about duplicating nature. Art that does copy nature is more likely to be found in places such as Big W or Kmart or... my point is it's heteronymous. Its artisticness is compromised by commercial influences. My use of artistic flowers, also heteronymous art forms, transformed the flowers into autonomous art, something I argue is not wholly compromised by commercial influences. Further, I think that my autonomous art, both the floral resin works and the painted wall, reflect the otherness of the beauty we find in nature and recovers it. To explain this, I'll talk a little more about natural beauty. Adorno argued that natural beauty, something we see as authoritatively valid, was other in two ways. Firstly, along with our attraction to it, we also fear the naturally beautiful. Adorno used the example of bird songs which were moving, but birds were also messages of ill fortune and death in myths. Secondly, we experience a non-identification with the naturally beautiful. As well as our attraction to it, we find it puzzling, a problem that needs solving. For Adorno, natural beauty is not smooth. It operates with rupture, a type of disunity. If you look at my work, it is also not smooth. Elements are juxtaposed against each other, the abstract artificial form in relation to the everyday, kitsch artificial flowers against resinous high art sculptural forms and geometric squares, bright lolly decorative paint against serious modernist architecture. My works can never fully be unified. There is tension operating in the work. The reading takes place in the play between these elements. And this is one of the practice's political agencies. It emulates the discord of natural beauty in a world where our view of nature is compromised by the social, for example, commodification. The otherness in the autonomy of my work is in excess of the heavily rationalist forces that govern society, and it recaptures a vision of natural beauty that is more unmediated. So not only does my work reinstate the otherness of the naturally beautiful, as all autonomous art does, in its explicit references to the beauty of nature, it is also a visual diagram of the whole question of how the naturally beautiful mirrors and politicises itself in autonomous art. So I'd like to state something more because it comes up so much in criticism about beautiful and autonomous art. How could the practice, often discrete objects that are so easily saleable, be an antidote to commodification? I think that my art's social mimesis can never be fully compromised by its commercial value. I don't think that my autonomous work is an alternative to commodification. As it is bought and sold, it comes out of commodification. Adorno would say that, similar to the concept of autonomous art and the naturally beautiful, the commodity is also fetishised. All three concepts conceal their social determination. The idea that the commodity subsumes all properties of itself to exchange value, however, is a lie. If the commodity loses its use value, it loses its exchange value. Ultimately, use value is exchanged, and my art's use is uselessness via its social mimetic forms. This uselessness cannot be consumed by exchange value in the configuration of the commodity. My autonomous art, therefore, in its configuration as commodity form, also reveals contradictions in the commodity. Contemporary interest in the social in art does not diminish my practice's power. Rather, my practice is a new, contemporary form of autonomous art located in new scenes of the social. It ranges from an autonomous public social artwork to discrete objects. In its useless form, it remains a valuable site for social critique. Now, I'd like to talk briefly, because we're running out of time, more about the agency of prettiness operating in the work. If we think of prettiness or attractiveness, Jeremy Gilbert Rolfe has used the example of fashion models. Viewing them doesn't lead us anywhere else. We stay right where we are with the pretty. Pretty keeps us focused at looking at what's in front of us. This is opposed to witnessing the sublime, another dimension of the beautiful, which leads us to awe-inspiring thoughts, or art that incorporates goodness, for example, the humane, the heroic, or the morally good, and is called beautiful, may lead us away from what is in front of us to thoughts about goodness, a type of deferral of the sensory. If you look at my work, there is not much that takes you anywhere else. You're invited through formal composition and in using pretty or decorative objects and ideas from popular culture to look around it for the sake of doing so. I believe that in this way my work utilises pretty's agency. When we see something pretty, thinking stops and bodily sensation, pleasure takes over. We live in the present with the pretty, and I think that by inviting the viewer to look around my work rather than inviting the viewer to defer sensation that you might have to do if you look at an idea's work, my art puts something in rather than takes something away. We're free to live in the present, connect to bodily sensation, rather than having to think historically. My work celebrates what is in front of you. Prettiness relates to frivolity. Pretty is not serious. If you consider my coloured brickwork, for example, it is decorative, and its frivolity is only contrasted by the serious modern architecture that the work inhabits. Critical theory in art is also nothing if not serious. Gilbert Rolfe draws attention to Derrida's idea that the frivolous has great power because it can never be fully defined. The dictionary can only provide a serious meaning. To invoke the frivolous can challenge the dominance of the idea, and idea-based art dominates the postmodern era. I see that my art, in its aesthetic frivolity, challenges the seriousness of the idea. It's frivolous in its bright lolly pastel colours, its decorative flowers and patterned surfaces. This frivolous prettiness, surely an aspect of the feminine, though, is not passive, it's indifferent. I think that we could hardly call, for example, the brickwork passive. In its frivolity, it is indifferent to its reception. It's indifferent to the idea. In my art's indifference, it is a feminist statement because the serious cannot control it. Now please turn to images 14, that's the last image. This feminist statement, therefore political statement, is to be found in an assertion within the domain of the beautiful, not the sublime. To come full circle now back to this PhD's original inspiration, pretty small water bowls crafted with flowers, as opposed to the sublime experience of snorkelling in the vast ocean round Bali, locates the work in the realm of the beautiful. I think engaging the pretty's agency and utilising the unsmoothness of beauty found in those humble water bowls shows us that the domain of the beautiful has great potential for radical thinking in art today. Okay, thanks very much.